All right, so let me start this webinar. So first, a brief introduction on myself. So I'm Manish. I have close to 16 years of IT experience. As an Agile practitioner, I've been working with company in managing and coaching the teams in helping them understand the Agile practices. I'm certified safe Agilist, which is a scaled agile framework for the enterprise, as well as I've done my certification on Scrum Master, as well as the product owner from Scrum Alliance. Before we go further on this particular webinar on Agile overview, a brief announcement from Tech Canvas that we have a Scrum workshop on 7th of August. So this is a full day workshop, and in this participant will be learning Scrum using live projects and interactive activities. There's a lot of background noise, so I'll be muting everyone. And in terms of agenda for this webinar, we'll be going through the Agile history. Then we'll talk about a little deep dive on Scrum and Kanban practices. We'll also touch upon the relative sizing. How does the estimation is done in the Agile frameworks? Because that's really important. And in the last, we'll open the forum for the question and answers. Let me mute everyone so that we don't have the background noise. All right. So let's start with the first topic of the agenda, which is Agile history. So with any innovation, what happens, there's always a problem statement first, and that's where the team starts getting the solution of the problem what they are facing. And the same applies to Agile software development. And there are a lot of problems, I won't say to the extent of the crisis, but that paved the way for discovering the Agile way of developing the software. For example, when earlier the software being developed, it all used to follow the lengthy process of documenting the requirement and then designing it up front. Development and testing used to take too much of a time, and then finally it used to go to the end user. And all this process, which is also called as a application delivery lag, used to take 3 or 3+ years. And back in 25 years, the 3 years of a delivery lag was too much for the end consumer to see the product what they were anticipating. Because since we documented the requirement and the need for the project, and finally it goes to the end customer, the scenario might have changed from the business perspective, and the finished product could be stale, so that the users could not be used it fully. So that was one driving factor. And talking about the application delivery lag, so if on manufacturing or construction or software development it was 3 years, consider the aerospace industry. This has the lag of as much as 20 years, because space shuttle programs which were developed in 92 were using the processing technologies not less than 1960. So that's really frustrating for the industry leaders and the thought leaders. And that's where they were coming together and thinking on the ways, how do we reduce this application delivery lag, and how do we ensure that whatever the end user wants is being given to them right in time. And that's where the Agile was born. So there was a meeting happened in 2001 in Snowbird, Utah, where all the Agile thought leaders got together, and they listed down what they think is the right way of doing the software development. And they created a white paper which is called Agile Manifesto. It was released, and then the industry latched onto it and started developing different methodologies, which we'll talk about further into the webinar. So what was Agile Manifesto? Let's have a brief look on what the various principles on the Agile Manifesto. So what they said is we are uncovering the better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. So if you see the 4 statements on the yellow box, they say there's a value in the items on the right, but Agile thought leaders believe that we value the items which are on the left much more. So the first one is individuals and interactions over the processes and tools, which is really key, because they believe that more the team members who are developing the softwares are talking to each other. That helps in understanding and breaking the communication barriers rather than documenting everything and relying on the tools. Working software over comprehensive documentation. This is another key aspect, and they say whatever is being developed incrementally should be working so that it can be taken back to the business users and take their feedback over time. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. So in earlier days, there were too much of focus on writing down everything on a piece of paper, and that is kind of written on stone, which cannot be changed. And if at all it changes, it requires too much of a bureaucratic process. So the customer need to be engaged with the team who is developing the software from the day one till the finished product is complete. And the last on the Agile Manifesto is responding to change over following the plan. As we all know in the software industry that once the requirement comes in and the final product goes out, the scenario is so dynamic that the requirements keeps changing. So we cannot completely rely on what has been documented in the plan. So team need to respond to the change. So what that means is it's not that planning is not important, but planning needs to be done on a regular basis so that all the change which are coming from the customers are taken care of. So let's talk about how this theory and the problem which software development industry facing evolved. So as the slide says, the software development is science and art. And earlier, the waterfall method development of software industry was taken from the civil and mechanical engineering primarily, because how they used to manage the projects was applied to software development. So we detailed the requirement, and based on those requirements, the design is being developed, signed off, and then the development and the QA signs off, and then finally it goes to production. And similar applies into the PMP certifications as well from the PMI.org, right? Because that certification, which is used massively by the software industry project managers, covers all the construction and the mechanical industry. But developing a software is not as similar as constructing a bridge or constructing a building. Because when constructing a bridge, the requirement do not change over the period of time since the construction start. But that's not the case in software development, where customer might not able to envisage very clearly in the start what exactly they want. So that's where I say that we started using waterfall or a software development by taking the practices from the constructions and mechanical engineering. That's what lead to the too much of a process heavy approach in building the software. And there are provisions in waterfall to make the changes in the plans, but what happens is there are constraint on the schedule and budget. Like if suppose there is a change after team is done with 50% of their development and the change comes in, so they can always go back in changing the design and then again do the impact on the change requirement. But the budget is always frozen when we start the project, right? And the date is always committed to the end customers. And that's where the team kind of always reluctant to make the change when we are following the waterfall method because of the budget and the schedule constraint. And another drawback on documenting the requirement too much and relying on it is there will always be a scope of misinterpreting the requirement when the customer has written it. That's where the team interaction is valued more in agile development than relying on the documented process, because when we talk to people, that's where you understand the details on what to be built. All right. So based on that, there are a lot of methods and theories being developed how teams should build the software. So in earlier days, it started with RAD, which is called Rapid Application Development. And this was the approach which used by building various components in parallel and then integrating it in the end. So what it did was it allowed team to build the product faster, and that's where it solved the problem of application delivery lag. Another similar method was a spiral model where all the phases of the project were done in circle and keep incremental increasing in the features. Scrum and Kanban we'll talk more about in the coming slides, where it is more widely accepted practices into the software industry right now. So this brings us to our next topic on the agenda, which is Scrum Framework. So Scrum is not an acronym. I mean, SCRUM does not stand for any abbreviated terms. So Scrum came primarily from the rugby game, where the rugby team huddled together and then tried to achieve their objective by very closely coordinating with each other. So when they huddle together and try to achieve their goal, the term is called Scrum. So that's a brief on it. So this is, we talked in the earlier opening on the webinar, how the waterfall delivery works. So what customer exactly want is delivered in the end. So value delivery to the customers is always happens in the end, and customer and the product managers do not know until QA signs off that what team is building on. How Agile or Scrum solve this problem is something like this. So what it does is it creates a software incrementally. And we'll talk about those terms in the further slide, what exactly is the sprint and releases go. But just for the high level, they keep delivering the working software after a certain time boxed, and it goes to the customer for their verification, and the feedback loop is shorter in this particular case. While in comparison to waterfall, customer only see what will be delivered in the end. So what it allows primarily is getting a feedback from the customer, and if any change needs to be done, team can always incorporate those changes before the next increment. So before we deep dive into how Scrum works, I just want to elaborate on a few artifacts and the terms which are heavily used in Scrum framework. One is product backlog. Product backlog is nothing but the requirement documentation, but this differs in terms of the content of the requirement. What it has is it has the stack ranked features what customer or the product owner wants in the product. So the most value driven features will be in the top of the product backlog, and then further down the reduced priority of the features. So what it allows team to do is team always picks the topmost items from the backlog and start building on it. So always the most customer demanded features will be worked upon by the team. So this allows team to not to work on the feature and spend their energy, which is not important for the market. Iteration or sprints is a time-boxed schedule which team uses to do their software development. So iteration sprint in a Scrum framework could be anywhere between 1 to 4 weeks. And during this duration, team picks up the features from the backlog, start developing it, and by the end they deliver. So start and end window could be anywhere between 1 to 3 weeks, and this window of a time box of 1 to 4 weeks is called iteration or sprints. Sprint backlog is another item what team picks up. So product backlog has all the features what to be released in the overall duration of the project, but sprint backlog is only have the features which are part of that sprint. So this is kind of a subset from the product backlog. And sprint backlog will also have the details at a granular level, which is at the task, because this is a more refined look at the product backlog where the features have been broken down by the team at a granular level, because they know what they will be building on in the next 1 to 4 weeks during the sprint cycle. Velocity is a very important term in terms of what gives the predictability to the overall release. So velocity is a sum of the story point. This is another term which is relating to the estimation, and so velocity is how much team is delivering in a sprint is called the velocity for that team. So if suppose we are estimating the backlog in terms of story points, so this is a relative sizing. This is another key term during this webinar. We'll deep dive into it. So this gives the insight on how much team is delivering in a time box sprint, and if we use the velocity, we'll know what will be the duration of the release, because we know the total sum of the story points and what needs to be delivered by the team, and using the velocity we know how many sprints will be required to develop the product. So let's see how the Scrum framework works. So this starts with the vision on the product roadmap, which is defined by customer in help with the product owner. I just want to use this term product owners because this can be interchangeable with the business analyst also in some of the organizations. And proxy product owner is another term which is used by the service industry, where time of the customer is limited and they cannot work with the team on a day-to-day basis. So that's where the proxy product owner or the business analyst performs the role of the product owner rather than the end customers themselves. So the ceremony happens called release planning in the start, and in the release planning what happens is product owner explains all the features of the product backlog, so that team gets to know what exactly will be developed as part of the overall release schedule. And if any questions are there, team asks the questions to the product owner so that they understand the requirements better. When I say team, this is the cross-functional team, and that's another very interesting part how the software development in Agile works, right? So starting from your developer to testers to DBA or the UX designers all sit together and understand the requirement. While in earlier cases of software development, it's only the key people from the team only know in the start that what will be developed. So everybody is on the same page in the release planning meeting, and they agree on what will be developed and when it will be developed at a high level. So once the release planning is done and team start the execution of the project, before starting the sprint planning happens. And during the sprint planning meeting, team just looks at the product backlog and picks the top items from the product backlog, which they can deliver during that sprint. So it could be 3 or 4 user stories which team can pick up. If they don't know their velocity, they go with their gut feel in the start, and the velocity of the team, how much they deliver during a sprint, will automatically come in a couple of sprints. And outcome of the sprint planning is sprint backlog, which will have the user stories and the further breakdown of the user stories into task, which will be done by the individual team members. So as I mentioned, sprint duration could be anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks. And during these 2 to 4 weeks, very important is that team performs the requirements in a totality. When I say totality, it means the done. So developer need to complete that requirement and tester need to verify it. So when the sprint ends, they will be able to complete the requirement so that it's a working software in the end. And during that sprint cycle, team meet daily in their daily stand-ups and talk about if there are any blockers for the team, and the Scrum Master can help the team in resolving the issues, or anyone from the team can help them out. So when the sprint ends, there will be a potentially shippable product increment available, and the sprint review happens at the end of the sprint, where all the stakeholders join in and the team presents what they have developed. And after this, product owners can take a decision to sign off if everything is being developed is as per the acceptance criteria which has been documented. If not, if there's some feedback, it always go back to the team, and team starts working on those feedback which is received by product owner or customers in the next cycle. So that's where the Agile or the Scrum framework helps in developing the software faster, because team only picked up what they can deliver and they do it completely, and they get the feedback also not in the end, but during the end of the sprint itself. Another feedback loop in Scrum framework is the sprint retrospective. Sprint retrospective happens in the end of the sprint cycle, where team reviews in terms of their working, how they did. So they identify the areas, what they have accomplished, is it the right way to do? So they document the practices which they should keep doing it. And also very objectively, they identify the areas which needs improvement. If suppose they did not handle some things the way they should have, they document it and identifies the very actionable action items, how they should improve upon it. So sprint after sprint, they always keep improving. So this is a continuous improvement which always happens in a Scrum framework, where team identifies the improvement areas and continue doing the right thing what they have been doing. And we have the potentially shippable product increment at the end of the sprint. And again, this cycle follows from the next sprint. They pick another set of stories from the product backlog, keep building it. Daily Scrum happens on the start of the day, and they do the sprint review in the end and retrospective until the release schedule is complete. So let's take a look at the various roles in the Scrum framework. So we have primarily 3 roles into a Scrum team. One is the product owner. As I mentioned, if there is a bandwidth limitation, so most of the time business analyst or the proxy product owner perform this role. So this is kind of an interfacing member who will deal with the team on a day-to-day basis. And they define the features of the product, decide on the release date and the content, and always keeps prioritizing the backlog for the release. Scrum Master is, I won't say it's a project manager, but Scrum Master is the person who is having a servant leader relationship with the team, who is always available for the team to remove their roadblocks. If team is stuck anywhere, Scrum Master is the go-to person who will manage their dependencies. And he also interfaces with the external stakeholders and try to make sure that team is guarded and not disturbed when they are working. Team is a cross-functional team, so it's not just a bunch of engineers. So team comprise of the developers, testers, and if the DBA is required, the UX or the UI involvement is there. So they all will become part of the team. And key characteristic of the Scrum team is they're always self-organizing. Scrum Master does not go to the team and say, okay, you do this task or you do that task. Rather, during the sprint planning meeting, it is the team who decides that, okay, I'm good in certain areas, I will pick those tasks. So that's the reason I say it's a self-organizing teams. And they always keep striving to improve on how they can do their functioning better, sprint after sprint. Let's talk about the various Scrum ceremonies. We talked about it briefly in the previous slide. So release planning is the ceremony where a team goes through the product backlog. Product owner explains it, what he wants to be developed during the release. Sprint planning is during the sprint what team wants to develop in the 2 to 4 week sprint cycle. And here the team deep dives into what all is needed to develop those features during the sprint cycle. Daily Scrum is a very quick, short meeting. It doesn't go more than 15 minutes, and the team decides when they want to do it. Normally it happens during the start of the day, and they decide on each member go in a circle and gives an update in terms of what they have been doing and what is the plan for the day, and if any impediment or a blocker for him, so that those can be removed by Scrum Master or anyone from the team. Sprint review, as I mentioned, happened in the end of the sprint cycle, where team demonstrate what they have developed during their sprint cycle. So this invite goes to everyone. Anyone can attend, but product owner or the customer is the one who signs off on the features which team developed. And retrospective is a continuous improvement way of just ensuring team reviews how they have been building software, and if suppose any improvement areas are there, so team very clearly and visibly outlines them. There's one interesting point also I just want to talk about is the burn down chart during Scrum Framework. So this burn down chart is a very visible picture which is displayed on the team area, where it shows very graphically how much team has planned in terms of story points, and as the team progresses they just keep marking, and it shows on the trend line if suppose team is deviating from the plan or not, so that everybody in the team knows if any course correction needs to be done. Okay, so this brings to our next topic now on the Agile methodologies called Kanban. So on the Kanban, so this term came from the manufacturing industry, primarily from Toyota, and they started using Kanban because there were many challenges. As I mentioned, crisis always leads to innovation and discovery. So there were a lot of challenges in manufacturing where there are a lot of overheads and wastage because the inventories were too high. Teams were piling up the spare parts which will be required to manufacture cars, but because they didn't know how much to be used, and a lot of wastage was happening during the process of manufacturing. So that's where Toyota started using the Kanban method. And in the Kanban, it's very important that we visualize the workflow. And Kanban never asks for the sweeping revolution of how people work. Rather, it encourages the very gradual change. And everybody need to understand and agree upon what team will be doing. And so what it does is team understand their current way of working and start depicting on a board what is their current processes, because until they visualize the workflow what's happening now, they will not be able to see which are the areas which is kind of slowing them down. So visualization of the workflow is very important in the Kanban flows. If we have a look at, that's how the Kanban board looks like. So it has what to be done in the, say, to do column, and various phases of their development goes in the swim lane diagram fashion. So if you see, it's very important that team understand what their current flow is, and what they do is they define what's the cycle time and the WIP for the Kanban flow. Cycle time, let me just elaborate this term a little. Any sticky note or the to-do item flows from the system from start to finish. The time it takes is called the cycle time. This is slightly different from what we talked about in the velocity during the Scrum, right? Which is the time box, how much team is developing in the sprint. But this is for an individual to-do item, how much time it takes from start to finish. And work in progress number is the very key factor which determines what is the continuous throughput of the team will be. Because and this goes in iteration, and team always have the flexibility to change it. So for an example, just think if suppose they have the 3 written into the dev swim lane flow, and somehow something is stuck there, and team is free to take more items, more than 3, but they cannot, because the WIP limit for this particular swim lane flow is defined as 3. And if suppose someone is stuck in any other flow, team has the responsibility to go back and clear that hurdle, because if that hurdle is not cleared, the whole throughput will be stopped. So this stopping the line approach to impediments, and also this encourages the very high level of quality and the rapid drop in rework sometime, because everything will be halted if that blockage is not cleared. So WIP limit always needs to be reviewed to ensure that all the resources have been optimally utilized. So a lot of teams get a confusion in terms of what practices works for them, whether it's Scrum or Kanban. But that depends on what is the need for the team for their processes, because not one size fits all. And so, for example, if someone is eating the rice, and if you ask a Chinese or a Japanese person, they'll be most comfortable in using the sticks in eating the rice, and it will be faster for them. But if you ask an Indian to eat the rice using the sticks, and they will struggle a lot in this. So it's very important we understand what our core capabilities are, and then we need to decide on what is the right tool in terms of solving that problem. And the same applies in deciding on Scrum or Kanban, whether it fits most. But few guidelines are available. So if suppose team is not too comfortable in Agile to work with, so they can always start on using the Scrum first and then move on to the Kanban, because let me just go back to the next slide to give a more, and then we'll come back. So this is approach and gives a high level view on what is more prescriptive and the more adaptive approach of doing a software development in Agile. So if you see, the rational unified process has the 120 plus guidelines. So when I say is 120, this number is the constraint what the process has, like in terms of roles, activities, and artifacts. And if you further down, the extreme programming is next in line, and Scrum, Kanban are the least prescriptive models. So what that mean is there are the less boundaries defined for Kanban team to follow, but this puts some more pressure on the team to define their own way of working, because the framework doesn't tell them what roles they can have or what artifact they need to produce. So the more mature the team is in doing the agile development, the less prescriptive method they need to embrace. For an example, if suppose team want to decide whether they want to have a project manager along with the scrum master, this question can only be answered if suppose there is a large program and there is multiple scrum teams and a lot of coordination needs to be done. So in that case, project manager makes sense, where the scrum master can be the team facing and project manager can look at the dependencies with other stakeholders. But for a small team, only the scrum master or whatever team decides the role they want to have, that can do. So it's very subjective. So more mature teams tend to go for a least prescriptive models, which are Kanban, and I suppose team want to just follow a certain way of working, which gives them predictability, and that's where Scrum fits. So this now let's talk about the last topic on this webinar, which is relative sizing. And this is important to understand how team estimate in agile methods, because the traditional way of estimating is always done by a key members of the team when they are starting the project, but that's not the case in agile. So first let's look at why at all we need to do an estimate. Yeah, this brings definitely the predictability, and the stakeholders or the sponsors of the project knows how much it will cost to build the product. But yeah, predictability is the most important aspect why team needs to do the estimation, because if you don't know the numbers in terms of what team is building, we definitely cannot control it if we don't have the measurable items. Let's take an example, because I do the running, and I like this example of running a race. And suppose you are running a 10-kilometer race and your target is to complete in 1 hour. So during the race, it's really important that you know where you are. For example, so to complete 10 kilometer in 1 hour, you need roughly per kilometer 6 minutes to finish. And at 5 kilometer, you notice that you're already 40 minutes done. So you realize that you know that you are 10 minutes behind the schedule, and that's where you need to do a course correction if you really want to finish it in 1 hour. So that's where the estimation helps and the numbers help. So team knows how they're doing during the execution, and if at all any change in plan needs to be done to meet the final end date, that can be done if we have the measurable numbers in the team. But when we estimate, it's also important that we are not wasting too much of our time in estimating itself. So this graph tells about there is always no return after a certain point in estimating when we are putting an effort. So team should not go deep dive into understanding the features and then very precisely trying to come up with a number that, okay, it will take this much, or how complex this is. So that's where the agile way of estimating helps. So how normally team does the estimation in Agile, they should always look at the features or the user stories in terms of size. When I say size, they should see how complex or how big that task is. There could be complex task which is small, but it will take longer. But there could be a big task and very repetitive and very simple, but it takes a larger amount of time. So they need to see what is the size of the task. I mean, how much effort it will take for a certain team member to develop it. And then they apply their velocity and derive the duration of completing it. So for an example, unit of that size could be anything. We'll talk about it into the next slide. So consider those 500 unit comes up for the overall project, and the velocity of the team, for an example, is 50. And so we need to know how many sprints or iteration is needed to complete that project. So we have the velocity of 50 and the total bigness of or size for the user stories is 500. So we know team need 10 iterations, and if we know that this velocity is for the 4 weeks, so we multiply it by iteration 10 into 4, and we know when we'll be delivering the end product to the customers. So when I say the team should not put too much effort in estimating, that's what I mean, because when we start the project, there's a lot of details which are not available with the team, and that's where they cannot give the precise numbers in terms of how big or how much effort it will take. So in the start, team always use the t-shirt sizing in terms of small, medium, large, extra large, which gives a very good impression to the product owner or the stakeholders when they stack rank the features in product backlog. But when they do the release planning, they put the story points against each user stories. A story point is nothing but an abstract number. And this most popularly, we use the Fibonacci series, which is 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, 21. And they assign the numbers of those story points to a feature. And the estimation is done collectively by the team. And they always compare the size of one story to another, and that's where they come up with a story point number for each story. And why the relative size is important? So because it's very fast and quick to do. For example, if suppose I ask team to tell what is the height of the room where they are sitting in, there'll be various answers, and team always tries to give a very precise number. They will say it could be 5 meters, 6 meters, 5.5, because they always have a tendency to not deviate too much from the actual number. But if we say, okay, there is a chair in the room, and how many chairs need to be put together to come up with the height of the room, so it will be pretty fast. They will say, okay, if you put 3 chairs on top of each other, it will be the height of the roof. So that's what team does in Agile Sprint estimation, where they look at the features where they have given the number, and in comparison to that story point, they derive the story point for the next feature. So this way, the estimation of the product backlog becomes very, very fast. And when they do the sprint planning, finally they do the estimation in hours, because that's where they know that what team will be working on. And finally, so Agile does not help team deliver more, rather it makes them deliver more transparently and predictably. So that brings to the end of the webinar. So let me just unmute you all, and I can take up question answers for next 10 minutes. Okay. Does anyone have any questions? That sounds like no questions from anyone. If there are no questions, we just end this webinar, and I just want to thank you again for listening in and for your time. Thank you, everyone, and have a
Oh, man.